Hey everyone, Ethereal here with a guide video on our latest 5-star Sumeru Hydro Sword character, Nilou. In this video, we'll be taking a look at her artifacts, her best teams, what stats should you aim for, and how good she is as a character. Anyways, let's get started. Nilou's normal attack is pretty straightforward, just 3 simple hits. This one scales off attack. Generally for her kit, it's not very fundamental, so you can kind of skip that. Her elemental skill, the Dance of Havskavar. Upon tapping it, you enter into a pirouette state for 10 seconds, and this gives Nilou the Hydro Infusion. And how many hits you've done will be shown above your head whenever you enter the pirouette state. So there are basically 2 different modes. The first mode, or what I like to call the Whirling Steps mode, is basically what you gain when you tap Elemental Skill, and upon pressing the final hit, she will unleash the water wheel damage and create a Tranquility Aura which lasts for 12 seconds. Essentially, the Tranquility Aura is similar to Barbara's elemental skill. It's just a small AoE of Hydro application, and it follows around your active character. And the Hydro application, as you can see in the footage in the background, is roughly this fast. I would say it's probably 1 tick of Hydro application every 2 seconds or so. It's not super slow, but yeah, it is what it is. And then the other mode, we have the Sword Dance mode, which is entered upon pressing your normal attack. So she performs the Sword Dance mode, and the final hit, the Luminous Illusion, will release a wave that does Hydro damage, and she will enter the Lunar Prayer state for 8 seconds. Essentially, in this state, Nilou's normal attacks will be replaced with her Sword Dance state, and any damage that she does here is considered elemental skill. So basically, her normal attacks get replaced with the custom Sword Dance that you do, and that scales purely on HP. And the damage does get affected by 2-piece Gambler since it is considered elemental skill. And lastly, her burst, Dances of Absendeji. Distant Dreams, Listening Spring. God damn, why is it so hard to pronounce? So it's just pretty straightforward. Nilou basically summons a Water Lotus that hits a lot of enemies within a certain range and does damage that scales off her HP. Enemies hit by the initial wave will be marked, and after a second, will receive a stronger damage called Lingering Aeon. Nilou's Ascension 1. So Nilou's Ascension 1, here's a wall of text. Basically, it only activates if you have only Hydro and Dendro characters in your team. Essentially, in order to activate this Ascension, you have to complete the third dance step for Nilou's Dance of Havskavar, also known as an elemental skill, and it gives the active character or nearby characters the Golden Chalice's Bounty aura for 30 seconds. You can roughly see the presence of this aura by looking at your active character, and notice how there is this kind of glowing blue aura around them. That is the effect. While very subtle and very difficult to see, given the duration of the aura, you don't really have to worry too much about it. So characters under the effect of this will have increased elemental mastery by 100 for 10 seconds when they are hit by Dendro attacks, because since Bloom does have a self-damage, and the regular cores will be replaced with Nilou's Bountiful Core, which has not only a bigger AoE, but a smaller fuse time. Thus they have a bigger explosion, and they explode faster. However, this Bountiful Core cannot trigger the advanced bloom reactions such as Hyper Bloom or Burgeon, and they share the same numerical limit, so it's mostly pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind that in order to activate this Ascension, you need to have only Hydro and Dendro in your team. Doesn't matter how many characters you have, as long as you only have these 2 elements. And then, to tie to this Ascension, we have her Ascension 4, where essentially for every 1000 points of Nilou's max HP above 30,000 will cause the damage dealt by her Bountiful Cores to increase by 9%. The maximum amount that you can reach from this passive is 400%, so generally there will be some math in the background to show you how much damage a regular C0 non-R1 Nilou can achieve. But generally, if you were to run triple HP with HP substats with Hydro Resonance, Nilou can probably reach 45 to 50k HP. In order to reach the maximum bonus that this Ascension gives, you do need the Key of Kachni Suit, simply because it is the only weapon that gives HP %, and the maximum amount can be achieved if Nilou is 74,000 HP. So yeah, most of it's just pretty straightforward. So let's move on to the talent priorities. So if you were to care about her personal damage, you can prioritize the elemental skill into the elemental burst. The normal attacks is not worth leveling simply because it does not have any effect on her playstyle, her kit, or her personal damage in any shape or form. And now let's move on to artifacts. So given how Nilou is a HP scaling character, 2 Tenacity of the Millilith is a must, and the other 2 pieces are completely optional depending on what kind of playstyle do you want to go. If you care about her personal damage, you can consider using the 2 Heart of Death set, Or if she is going to be the on-field Hydro applicator for your Bloom-based team, you can consider using 2 Wanderer and 2 Gilded for the 80 Elemental Mastery that it gives. Or if you care about her burst more, you can consider using Double Emblem for the energy recharge, or you can use Double Noblesse just to increase the damage of your burst even further. And for what kind of stats should you aim for your artifacts? It depends on what playstyle you want to choose. If you want to play on-field DPS, or basically you care about Nilou's personal damage, I recommend HP Sands, Hydro Goblet, and a Crit Circlet. However, if you do have a HP Circlet with really good substats, let's say something with 10 crit rate or 20 crit damage and so on, and your crit stats has the nice ratio, feel free to use the HP Circlet to buffer damage even further, since the difference between a Crit Circlet and a HP Circlet with really good crit stats is very marginal. And alternatively, if you want to play her Bountiful Core or her Bloom team, just run triple HP and aim for Elemental Mastery substats. There will be footage in this background, there will be a little bit of testing, so you might be thinking, since Nilou's personal Bloom scales of Elemental Mastery, so you might be wondering whether should I run triple Elemental Mastery or triple HP on Nilou. So here's the footage in the background for comparison. With the triple EM Nilou with some extra Elemental Mastery substats, and she's given Iron Sting, you can see here that her Bountiful Core is doing around 22,874 damage with Dendro Traveler using the Deepwood Memory set. And on the other hand, the next footage that we'll be seeing right now should be the triple HP Nilou with as much HP substats as possible, doing 18,353 Bountiful Core damage along with Deepwood Memories. While you may think that the Elemental Mastery build does more damage than the triple HP build, keep in mind that that damage is only available if Nilou is the one to trigger the Bountiful Cores. On certain cases where other Hydro characters, or maybe your Dendro Traveler or your Collei is the one triggering the Bountiful Cores, the damage may be way less simply because the Elemental Mastery is not as high. So do keep in mind that triple HP is highly recommended over triple EM due to consistency. Anyways, let's move on from the artifact options to the weapon options. So weapon options, we'll split it into 2 categories. We have the support option, aka the Bloom build, and then we have the on-field DPS option. So let's start off with support. So we have the Favonius, as you can see the footage in the background, that's the damage of the C0 Nilou with Favonius with triple HP. Favonius is a decent weapon if you have some good crit rate in order to trigger the passive, so you can use it if you want some energy recharge on your Nilou if you care about her burst, but I personally do not recommend using this weapon if you don't have sufficient crit stats to trigger the passive. And then there is also the Iron Sting, which provides some mental mastery, and this is mostly useful if you want to use Nilou as the on-field Hydro driver or Hydro applicator. You can see that the Bloom damage is way higher than that of the Favonius. I recommend using this weapon if you intend to use Nilou as the Bloom driver. And then the final option we have is the Sacrificial Sword. The damage might be similar to Favonius, but the upside of this weapon is that if you were to enter Lunar Prayer, the Lunar Prayer mode where your normal attacks get replaced with the Sword Dance, it is extremely easy for Nilou to trigger the passive, and thus you can maximize her Hydro application by having both the Tranquility Aura and the Lunar Prayer effect, and this should help her Hydro application when it comes to creating the blooms. And now moving on to the second build, we have the DPS build. So let's start off with the stat sticks. We have the Black Sword and the Black Cliff, which both are mostly just stat sticks. They're passive and their stats are mostly useless, and I personally don't recommend using this weapon unless you have very lackluster crit stats and you do need that extra boost to make your ratios look really good. And other more viable options, we can look at the Festering Desire. Given how her elemental skill replaces her normal attack with the Sword Dance, Festering Desire works really well for an on-field DPS Nilou, and you can see the damage numbers right here tabulated. So personally, Festering Desire is really good for her personal damage from her elemental skill. However, since this weapon was only available from the events back in the introduction in Dragonspine, which is way back in 2020 in version 1.2, it is quite difficult for most players to have it. So for those who have it, you can consider this as an option. The energy recharge side stat is pretty good. For those who don't have it, here's a few recommendations that is way more affordable and way more accessible to most of the players. Now we are going to be looking at the 3-star options. The first one, surprisingly, Cool Steel and preferably Refinement 5. Cool Steel is a surprising 3-star option that works surprisingly well with Nilou, simply because of its passive at Refinement 5, where it increases the damage done to opponents affected by Hydro or Cryo by 24%. Preferably, it would be better for you to have higher refinements, but given how Cool Steel can be obtainable from the gacha, it's best to assume that most players would have Refinement 5. Here's the numbers, here's the footage on the how much damage it does roughly. So generally this weapon is pretty cheap, given that it's a 3-star weapon, it's highly accessible to a majority of players, it's good for overall damage assuming you already have really good crit stats. And moving on, we have the final option, the one and only Harbinger of Dawn. Obviously if you have this at Refinement 5, you will get that 28% crit rate and 46.9% crit damage at level 90, and while you can see the damage in the footage right now is pretty good, keep in mind that in order to maintain the crit rate passive, Nilou's health has to be above 90%, so I personally do not recommend this weapon unless you use a strong shield character such as Zhongli, Diona, or maybe Tang Fei if you can keep it up. Now for this section, we'll be looking at all the options for the teams. Keep in mind that the teams recommended here are the ones that I've personally tested. That works really well. If you have any other ideas or if you have other teams that you want to try, feel free to do so. So let's start off with her Bountiful Core team, which consists of Nilou, Barbara, Dendro main character, and Colette, where the Nilou in the footage right now is running 2 Tenacity of Millilith to Wanderer with a triple HP build. Generally, I've done multiple tests where the teams would have 3 Hydro and 1 Dendro, aka Dendro Traveler, and I found that Dendro Traveler's Dendro application isn't generating bloom fast enough, so I personally do recommend keeping at least Dendro Traveler and Colette on this team, and obviously Nilou is a must. For the last slot is what you can consider to be a flex slot. If you need a healer, you can use Barbara. If you feel like you don't really need a healer, you can run Xingqiu for the extremely fast Hydro application, or you can also run Yelan for a high personal damage. I forgot to mention that you can use Kokomi as your flex slot for the healing and on top of the damage that she can provide from the Ocean Hued clan. And moving on to the next team, we have the Hyper Bloom Driver Nilou team, or as one of my viewers would like to call it, the Hyperlow team, which consists of Nilou, Dendro Traveler, Kazuha, and Kuki Shinobu. It is to no one's surprise that the introduction of Dendro definitely helped Kuki Shinobu become a really strong character with Hyper Bloom builds. So this team is pretty straightforward. You basically just use Kuki as the Hyper Bloom trigger, and Nilou will stay on field with a Luna Prayer in order to trigger the Bloom Cores. And this team actually works surprisingly well, whether against groups and single targets. The next team that you can definitely run it on is the Vaporize team, or what some may call the National or International team, which consists of Kazuha, Bennett, Chengling, and Nilou of course. And the Nilou in the footage right now is running the 2 Heart of Depth, 2 Tenacity with HP Hydro Crit. And this team is pretty straightforward, it just does a lot of damage. Either Nilou vaporizes and gets her damage and personal damage amplified, or Chengling's Pyro Nado just gets amplified even further, so there's nothing much to say about this, pretty straightforward. And the final team that works surprisingly well is the Mono Hydro team, where we have Nilou, Xingqiu, Yelan, and Kazuha. Not only can this team take advantage of Hydro Resonance to buff Nilou's and Yelan's damage, Nilou's personal damage is also pretty good, but honestly this team would work well without Nilou. So onto my final thoughts of how I see Nilou as a character. I'm well aware that there is a lot of controversy going on about how restrictive her Ascension 1 is, and my stance on that is that I do wish it was a bit less restrictive, but what's done is done, so we can just move on from that, yeah? And in terms of how Nilou is as a character, she's actually surprisingly balanced. You can run her in her intended team and it does really well. The damage from her cores at C0 and Constellation 0 is pretty good. Or you can run her in other teams like the Hyper Bloom team or the Vaporize or Mono Hydro team, and she still does pretty well. Personally, if I were to compare her to other Hydro 5-star characters, I would definitely feel like the closest that the most similar Hydro 5-star character that we can compare her to is definitely within the likes of, say, Tartaglia or Ayato, simply because of the amount of damage that they do is not very high, but they are really good at applying Hydro to a huge massive enemy. And Tartaglia's burst, along with Nilou's burst, is similar in the sense that it does a huge instance of damage within a short time. So yeah, I think that's all the guide. I think Nilou is a pretty good character. I'll probably rate her 7 out of 10, which is pretty balanced. So I hope this guide helps you guys, and I'll probably make more of these guides once I actually do have more characters built up, with which I do, but we will see about it when it happens. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.